On this episode of the DTVC podcast, we've got Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast on, and we're discussing Legionnaire. So we're kind of continuing our look at Jean-Claude Van Damme films with him, with this one here from the early 2000s. Really fun conversation there. There's a lot to discuss, so stay tuned for that. And then next week, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews is on. We'll be looking at the 1994 Roger Corman Fantastic Four film, kind of ahead of the new one coming out in a couple weeks. But we'll also open that episode by talking about the new Superman movie. So I'm excited to discuss that with him. So keep an eye out for that next week. Then in terms of DTVC Extra, I think we're kind of done with that for a little bit, but we'll see. You just never know. I mean, again, I just saw that Superman movie. That could be, one of those things. I just recently saw Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania, and so that's the last of the Marvel feature films that were released theatrically for me to watch. So if you go on Wikipedia and you see, the list of movies based off Marvel publications, there's one that's the feature films. It starts with Howard the Duck and it ends with Thunderbolts. I've seen everything in that list there now. So at the very least, we'll get some letterbox lists out there. But in terms of things like Marvel Phase 4, Phase 5, I've got some TV shows to watch there. So it makes it a little bit harder. It's not as easy as it was when I was doing Marvel Phase 1, 2, and 3, where it was just movies. But we'll see. We'll see. You never know with DTVC Extra, right? Sometimes the spirit moves me, and I just want to get out there and do another podcast. So we'll see what happens. Then in terms of the YouTube channel, this past week we posted two fights from Don the Dragon Wilson and Gary Daniels in Blood Fist 4. So that was a really popular one. People really like that one. So I'm not sure what we're going to do for this week. I've got a few things in mind. The key thing has been trying to figure out the best way to get the movie into my OBS system. So with Blood Fist 4, I actually had a copy of it that I was able to kind of put on it's an MP4 version, I think, or something like that, and I just was able to load it directly into OBS and pull what I needed from it, which made it really easy. Whereas other ones, a lot of times I'm doing a screen capture where I'm capturing the movie from Tubi or something else like that. So, I don't know, again, having to get my own copies of it isn't always the easiest thing either, but we'll see. So we'll see what we get for next week there. But it's been really fun so far. And again, if you haven't yet, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, like the videos, comment on the videos. One of the things I was reading about is with a new channel like mine, especially now that I'm doing these new videos here, a lot of times people see no comments and they're afraid to be the first person to comment, right? Kind of like when you're at a play or something like that, you don't want to be the first person clapping, and so that sometimes it can be hard to be like that brave soul that's the first person to comment. But definitely go ahead and be that brave soul, be that first person to comment. I'd always appreciate that. And then in terms of the site, we just did Save Me this last week, and then I've been kind of shuffling things around just because we're getting kind of jammed up with certain names. So like Colas McKay, we did him back-to-back weeks. That's 60 movies for him. PM, we've been doing a few extras lately. Cynthia Rothrock. I was going to do Accident Man, Hitman's Holiday this week because that's another Scott Adkins, but we just did Lights Out that had him in it. So we're going to go with 12 to Midnight, Robert Bronzi film with Tito Ortiz that Ty and I did. Also, speaking of Jean-Claude Van Damme and covering Van Damme movies with Sean Malloy, you may remember a previous podcast where we did Kill 'Em All 1 and Kill 'Em All 2. So I was going to do Kill 'Em All 2 this past weekend. I was going to review that finally. I had gotten one image of it for the podcast, for the Canva ad that I do, when I do the social media ads for the podcast. So I needed two more screenshots to be able to do the review, and I went to Netflix and discovered that because my wife and I had dialed things down to the ad version of Netflix, that apparently Kill 'Em All 2 is gated. If you have the ad version of Netflix, you can't watch Kill 'Em All 2. Another one we can't watch, Madam Web I can't watch anymore. I can't watch Venom Last Dance anymore. Can't watch One More Shot on there. I think it's One More Shot, or maybe it's One Shot that's on there and One More Shot's on Hulu. I don't even know. But the fact that they're gating movies, that they're saying you just can't watch certain movies if you get the ad version, is ridiculous. I've never heard of that before. So I don't know. I guess that's a new thing. So I think I've heard maybe Paramount might be doing something like that too. So these streamers, right? They're just getting more and more ski mask and gunnish, aren't they? They just are trying to rob us more. And so I guess that's where people will say, hey, physical media is the way to go, because but I don't know, can you get Kill 'Em All 2 on physical media? I don't even know if you can get that on DVD. But I don't want to buy it just to be able to review it. I actually don't need Kill 'Em All 2. I don't need to own Kill 'Em All 2 in any way, shape, or form. So just streaming it for 5 minutes just to be able to get 3 images is all I really need. But no, it's gated, so who knows when that review is going to go up? Because at this point, Van Damme is actually only a few movies away from hitting the 40 club. So if we did Kill 'Em All 2, I think the other ones are Welcome to the Jungle, We Die Young, and Swelter. And that would get him in the 40 club. But he's going to be stuck in limbo for a while because Netflix is gating movies because it's, we pay at the nose for no ads. Like, we don't watch Netflix enough that we need. And actually, the funny thing is we've been doing Breaking Bad. My wife is introducing me to Breaking Bad. And there's no commercials on that anyway, so it doesn't even matter. So anyway, rant done. But yes, so again, these streamers, they're getting more and more fun with us every day, I think. So and actually, I was trying to think if I have anything else after that rant. I think that might be it. So again, buy my books. That's always the easiest way to support the site. I just posted about chat and accounting on my Facebook page. I mean, the other thing too is if you see my book ads, if you don't feel like buying my books, liking or sharing the book ads, I always appreciate that as well. I know you're probably thinking like, hey, I come to Matt for bad action movie content. I don't really care about his literary fiction. I get that. I totally get that. But even hitting that like button, it means a lot to me when you do that. So I always appreciate when I see people liking the book post is a huge thing for me. So yeah, anybody who wants to do that, especially if it's not your kind of writing, I always appreciate that. It always means a lot to me when people do that. So yeah, my newest one, Nadia and Aiden, the link is in the podcast description. So if you're interested, check that one out as well. But anyway, I have rambled a lot here. I'm already over 6 minutes. So let's get stuck in on this podcast episode. So after our theme song here played by John Cross from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures, when we come back, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This Podcast will be on, and we'll be talking about Legionnaire. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined once again by a special guest. We've got Sean Malloy from I Must Break This Podcast. Welcome back, Sean.
Hey man, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, especially regarding the muscles from Brussels. So
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was remarking as we were getting ready to start this episode. So this is the fifth time we've looked at a Van Damme movie. So we did Replicant, we did Darkness of Man, we did not the fifth movie. We did the two Kill 'Em Alls, and now we're going to be looking at Legionnaire. And I mean, yes, the Kill 'Em Alls are similar because they're sequels, but I can't think. I can't think of another action star who you do 5 movies and have them be so different.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one thing that I think we've maybe alluded to in our prior conversations. But one of the things I got to give guys like Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren credit for, more so than Steven Seagal, let's be perfectly honest, is Steven Seagal. I mean, especially when he entered the direct-to-video realm, okay, he was playing the same damn character. Yes. You know what I mean? The titles were all interchangeable. His character was always the same. And that was purely because that's Seagal's ego. You know what I mean? That's pretty purely what, I mean, I think in one, he was a former Russian gangster. And then another, he was well, I'm trying to think some of his bizarre ones. Oh, he was a novelist. He was a crime novelist. But in the end, he's a guy who has these experiences. What's very interesting about Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, like I said, is they once they went into the direct-to-video realm, both guys, Van Damme especially, really experimented and tried new avenues, new characters, maybe not so much new genres, but they were at least attempting something new.
Yeah, because I think even this one we're going to be talking about here, Legionnaire, it kind of falls into action elements. It's almost like there's a sense of if you're going to have Van Damme in the movie, you've got to have him fight at some point. But it's almost like it's a trade-off maybe. It's like where Van Damme's like, okay, I'll fight for some of the movie, but you've got to let me play a part that I haven't played before and do some things that I haven't done before.
No, 100%. And with Legionnaire, I mean, I was really looking forward to discussing this one with you because This one is fascinating. I think the production of it is pretty fascinating. The rollout, I think, is equally interesting because this was actually the first direct-to-video Jean-Claude Van Damme effort, okay, that he had ever done. It was intended, I don't know if you looked this up at all or anything, but it was intended to be a theatrical release. I actually vividly remember when this was in production, and it was announced that he was going to be, that this was the next Van Damme picture. Yeah, it was intended to be a theater release. But then after, films like Double Team tanked at the box office, and Knockoff, that one didn't do so well at the box office. Then Universal Soldier: The Return, that was pretty much like his last gasp at that point. And so Legionnaire was a company, I think it was Lionsgate who had that one, which is interesting because it was Sony that had the other ones. But Lionsgate at that point said, you know what? This isn't going to do well in theaters. Okay, Van Damme just isn't a box office draw anymore, and so they announced that it was going to be direct to video. Even this is even actually, if you can remember, but this is actually really before the advent of DVD. This was direct to VHS, which was kind of, in a lot of ways, kind of uncharted territory for a big box office name at one time. Maybe he wasn't anymore in 1999, but for a big box office name to suddenly be going and doing a direct-to-video film, that was a bit of a gamble. But I mean, he came in at the right time. That's the one thing you got to give him credit for, is while maybe he wasn't a box office name anymore, he came in at the right time in the direct-to-video market to really capitalize on that market, to where all of those films that he had come out subsequently did really, really well rental-wise. I remember when this came out, the Blockbuster that I frequented, I mean, they had an entire wall of it for a direct-to-video release. You know what I mean? But they had an entire wall of rentals for this one.
Yeah, that's a really great point too, because it's like, the big sort of distributors had started to really get into the DTV game in like the around this time, late 90s, early 2000s. And it's I think, this movie looks, even like with a cover and everything, it looks bigger than, like you think of Seagal, the stuff that he was doing at the same time, which, Seagal was successful in that early 2000s period as well with DTV stuff. But you you know you I wouldn't think of a Seagal movie as having a whole wall on Blockbuster, at Blockbuster, the way a Legionnaire would. But I think it's a testament to Van Damme that he had. I mean, I guess we could say the same thing again about Seagal. They both had a loyal fandom that they brought with them to the DTV realm. But I love that Van Damme, he when he started doing these direct to video movies, he took the opportunity to kind of try different things that he hadn't been doing before.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing about this film too that's really interesting, it's almost I think one of the big shames about this movie is I think it is the most epic and prestigious of all of Jean-Claude Van Damme's movies, easily. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, this film has this kind of epic war scope and scale to it. You know what I mean? It's an action film, you could say, but what's really kind of cool about it is it's a film that I think even like a history buff would enjoy as well. You know what I mean? Because he's not doing his martial arts or anything like that. I mean, at this time, I mean, because he really did grow into his own as an actor as he continued down the direct-to-video route. But what's really interesting about this film is this was, I mean, you can see him really doing some acting, doing some, you know what I mean? Some attempts at that. I mean, and is it amazing? I mean, some could argue probably not, but I mean, I feel like he's trying things, and this is his attempt to do a, I'm trying to think, what are some of those epic war type movies? You know what I mean? But I mean, that's basically what he's, trying his hand at.
Right. This is like a smaller scale Lawrence of Arabia type deal. Right.
Bingo.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I liked about this movie as well is that, we think of like the 90s with Van Damme, where, I mean, he gave us so many fantastic movies, but there was always this thing where they had to shoehorn a reason for his accent in the movies. And I wonder, we get into the direct-to-video realm, there isn't this impetus to be like, oh, he's got to be in America doing American things. It's like, okay, we can set this in Europe. We can set this in historical Europe, in the 20s in Europe. and do it that way. And there's almost, I wonder if there's maybe a sense from him where it's like, okay, I'm playing this guy from the 20s in France. I can kind of be be more European. I don't have to always worry about like, what's this weird backstory, this awkward backstory that they gave me to make my accent fit in the movie.
And I honestly think a lot of that was at Jean-Claude's behest.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, because if you really think about it too, once, I mean, it's gone down, in the history books, if you will, but he was Universal Pictures. He was their golden boy. Okay. He was going to be their big flagship action hero, because it was at that time, every studio kind of had their action guy. Right. So Warner Brothers, they had Stallone and they had Seagal, and Universal, they had done quite a few movies with Jean-Claude. He was going to be their guy. The story goes, they offered him a picture deal. I think it was like a 4 or 5 picture deal. Jean-Claude wanted more money and said, Jim Carrey's getting $20 million a movie. I want more than that. And Universal said, no, thank you. And so they dropped him. What's interesting, though, is once Universal dropped him, okay, and he did a few films for Sony and everything, all of those films inexplicably suddenly take place in France. And so I wonder if, I mean, it's not just coincidence, but I do wonder if by that time, because maybe he had been working with maybe smaller budgets, if maybe he had more control over them a little bit more. But if you look at it, okay, Maximum Risk, where does that take place? Well, it takes place for the most part in New York, but it starts out in France because he's a French cop. Okay, if you look at Double Team, that one, he starts out in France as well, and then he goes to Antwerp, Belgium. Okay, and then if you look at this particular film, he's a boxer in France who, this one's interesting because at least in those other movies, Maximum Risk especially, he is speaking French, but and this one we have to put aside our disbelief. He's in France, but they all speak English as well.
Right. You know what I mean? Right, with a French accent. Everybody, I guess, everybody who's French speaks English with a French accent, and then, for example, we have an American character, so he doesn't have to worry about it. It's kind of a cool idea because it's one of those issues, right, with American film goers. It's like, could you watch a Van Damme movie that's completely in French with English subtitles, and it's like, okay, well, maybe not, it probably wouldn't have the reach in America that they'd want it to. So, okay, let's find a way around that. And so it's just like, okay, everybody's speaking with a French accent. You have to assume they're speaking in French, which is an interesting way to go about it.
Well, and it's really interesting too. I've actually said this as well. If you look at those films that he did with Universal, okay, those ones are, well, pardon the pun, but they're a little more universal. They're a little more mainstream. Okay, I've long said, but his films like Time Cop and Sudden Death, love those movies. Okay, but those are ones where even if you're not a Jean-Claude fan, you could watch those with your mom in the room. I feel, you know what I mean? Like they're universal. You know what I mean? They're on the same level as like a Speed or something like that. But then once he left Universal and he started, he went to Sony, and then obviously went even further down the direct-to-video route. His films were so much more niche than they were with Universal. I mean, if you look at, for example, Knockoff is a Jackie Chan movie,
right?
Basically, okay. If you look at Double Team, I love Double Team, but Double Team, the tones of Double Team are all over the place. Yes. It's like this parody of a James Bond movie with some neon thrown in. I mean, it is just a wacky thing. And then you have this little film. I say little, but then you have this movie Legionnaire, this period epic Lawrence of Arabia type piece. You know what I mean? And it didn't. And I think the other thing too that we need to pinpoint too that's really unfortunate, and I can't take credit for this observation. A buddy of mine mentioned it, but it's really kind of sad. They always talk about how it's so difficult for comedians to make the transition over and do drama. You know what I mean? But many comedians have tried it and they've had luck with it. But it's really sad. I think it's even more difficult for action stars to make the transition outside of the action genre, because they're even more pigeonholed. And I always kind of laugh at when people, after the passing of Brandon Lee, and I don't mean to mitigate that or throw shade at Brandon Lee by any means, but I always have to kind of laugh at when people said, oh, if he hadn't died during The Crow, oh man, he would have gotten much bigger and better roles, and we would have seen him in some romances and everything. And it's kind of like, well, I guess we'll never know. I'd be willing to bet though, Matt, that Brandon Lee would have slipped down he and Van Damme would have probably been jockeying for the same roles after The Crow. You know what I mean? And his career would have had the same trajectory. So
yeah, I totally agree there, because I mean, so if you look at that period, right, where it was, like you said, Brandon Lee was just sort of coming out. Dolph is someone who had slipped down, because he had, unfortunately, Masters of the Universe didn't do as well as they wanted, but then also the Punisher movie kind of gets, Red Scorpion didn't do as well, so he was kind of coming down, earlier in the '90s, but you had studios trying it with, Thomas Ian Griffith, Jeff Speakman, and really it's more like Seagal and Van Damme that take off. But then there's sort of like this thing where the bottom falls out in the '90s, where like Schwarzenegger's biggest one is True Lies, and then he kind of isn't really. I shouldn't say the biggest one, because I think Terminator 2 is the biggest one, but you know what I mean. Like True Lies was kind of his last big one that was like really making that kind of money. Stallone had duds with things like Judge Dredd. And I think Brandon Lee would have been a victim of that. That think about it. If you're making an action movie in the mid '90s, are you going to cast Brandon Lee or are you going to cast Nicolas Cage? Right? It's like, well, we've established that Nicolas Cage can do action after The Rock, so let's keep putting him in. Or Bruce Willis, or somebody that that was kind of the thing at that point, was that they were taking non-action actors and putting them in action movies.
Yeah, how wild is it? I was actually just having this conversation the other day with my wife, but how wild is it that, I mean, look, in my opinion, at least, 3 of the greatest action movies of the 1990s all starred Nicolas Cage,
right?
Who wasn't really an action star. He's an actor, but he had gotten his Oscar win for Leaving Las Vegas. But I mean, my God, the 3-punch of The Rock, okay, Con Air and Face Off is amazing. Yes. I mean, it is absolutely amazing. But yeah, I've talked about this, on my show when I was doing that. But if you look at the year 1999, the late 90s was a really, really unfortunate time for the action stars, because here they are, they're reeling from The Matrix. I mean, The Matrix was a complete game changer for the action genre. And so then you have all of these action stars. Well, suddenly they're kind of struggling, and they're kind of trying to find their place. And if you look at them in this period, I mean, it was not good for anybody. Okay. So, Van Damme, by that point, like we've talked, I mean, at that point, the writing was on the wall, and this film came out, Legionnaire, and was his first direct-to-video effort. But if you look at Dolph Lundgren, Dolph Lundgren was still going, but his direct-to-video films around this time were dreck. I mean, they just were The Last Patrol and Agent Red. I mean, they're just, oh God. But then if you look at the big guys, because I always personally looked at, okay, Mount Rushmore, if you will, or the A list was always Stallone and Schwarzenegger. And then if you go to the B list, suddenly that's where you get the Van Damme and the Dolph Lundgren and the Seagal. But if you look at them, okay, so Schwarzenegger had End of Days. Oh, yeah. I happen to love End of Days, but End of Days really did nothing at the box office. And then Stallone, my God, Stallone was hurting. I mean, he had bombs before, but I mean, he did Get Carter in October. That came out in October of 2000. That one tanked and was nominated for Razzies. Then he had Driven that came out. Yeah, Driven, and that one, same thing. That one didn't do that well. And then he had a couple direct video efforts. A lot of people seem to forget, but 2002, 2003, he had a few films that went direct video. And to be perfectly honest, I actually thought that Stallone was done. To be honest, I thought that he was pretty much out of it. It took him. He needed to resurrect Rocky and Rambo. That's what helped him get back. So. I mean, yeah, we can talk about, how, Van Damme, he was a has-been, but I mean, look at all of those dudes were really struggling. And I mean, look, we can say, I mean, with Schwarzenegger, it was him entering politics that I think really kind of, I don't want to say rescued him or saved him, but that's how he was kind of able to escape these trenches. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely correct. He because you're right about like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, because he was even bigger in the early 90s. I think, Stallone's, Rocky 3 was like 88, and then he starts to tail off a little bit earlier. And so there's like, almost like you said, like by the time you get to things like End of Days, Sixth Day, and stuff like that from Schwarzenegger, the other guys had all fallen out before that. And he was it was like almost like a last gasp with him. And I think you're right. I think there was almost a sense of like, I could do direct to video, or I could do I could run for governor. And there's almost a sense of like, well, I'm married to a Kennedy. I feel like I should be able to pull this off, and he did kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, he was governor. So, but you're right that you wonder if he would have been doing. There's a part of me that wonders if he would have been doing direct-to-video movies, or if he would have looked at it as like, I've got enough money. But he has done some stuff now, right? That's sort of like lower end stuff, like Waiting for Gunther and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he has that show on Netflix, Fubar. But I mean, the latest season came out and the reviews are not that good. I don't even think it's making the top 10. Yeah. So I think that's going to be the last of that we hear of that show. But yeah, with Legionnaire, I mean, man, you got to give Jean-Claude credit because, yeah, like I said, when he left Universal and he went to Sony, Sony was trying with putting all these films in theaters, but I think this one was deemed, I don't know if unreleasable is the term, because I think Lionsgate did have it. But if you remember Lionsgate around this time too, not a heck of a lot of their films were getting in theaters.
Right.
So I think they decided, direct-to-video was a good route for them. I mean, and that's how they pretty much got their start, to be perfectly honest, is they started as a direct-to-video label and then started getting films in theaters. But I actually do remember, it's kind of wild going back, but I do remember when this film was gearing up for its home video release. I worked at a video rental store, and there were two magazines. One was Entertainment Weekly that I was reading, and it was, like I said, it was the rollout of this one was, I don't want to say uncharted, but was pretty wild, because the article was talking like, hey, Van Damme, his next movie is going direct to video, but there was also rumors at the time where it was going to go direct to video, but then they were going to put it in in theaters after its direct to video rollout. And I think at the time everybody kind of knew, like, okay, that's wishful thinking,
right?
Not going to happen, right? But yeah, I remember this got a full page spread in what they would do with a lot of the video stores is they would give us like magazines of upcoming releases that we could kind of promote, and this one got like a full page spread in that flyer magazine. So yeah, while it was direct to video, it was getting a pretty decent push. And then I remember too, I think what really helped it too is it got a premiere. Same thing, actually, Replicant had a pretty similar rollout, but this had a premiere on the USA Network maybe 3.5, 4 months after this, after it premiered on video. I could be wrong with that number, but it was fairly quick. So I mean, this was getting out there.
Yeah, because I remember that as well. You bring up an excellent point about that. That's something I kind of forgot about this, because obviously the one I always think of is Blackjack, which was, John Woo thought he was going to be making a TV show with Dolph Lundgren, and it ends up being a USA Network movie. But I forgot about that. But that's right, that USA would do premieres of these Van Damme movies not long after they were out on video, and it was kind of a big deal for them. I mean, they would make their own movies as well, and they weren't quite in that role of making their own movies, but yeah, because I was thinking of some other ones, like what was it, the Shannon Doherty movie, Blindfold Acts of Obsession, I think was another one that was like a USA premiere, and that would, it's interesting to think about, because I guess they were also they weren't owned by Universal at that time either, so they weren't really affiliated with as a company. Like now, they're Universal's outlet, and so they just play Law and Order and Fast and Furious all day. But you could go through Van Damme's DTV, his DTV movies at that time on USA. Seagal was another one you could see on there as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, like I already said, for maybe the theatrical box office was not bringing in the dollars that it had used to, but I mean, look, he came in, if he was going to strike in the direct video market, he came in at the right time, I mean, and the other thing too that's interesting is, I don't know, man. I mean, I think it would have happened eventually. We talk about how this Universal deal that he had said no to, I think honestly, I mean, I think it was bound to happen eventually anyway. Because like I said, look what happened with Stallone. Look what happened with Schwarzenegger. But I mean, it's not like he was really shattering box office records. Look, I saw all of his movies in theaters, but I mean, his biggest hit was Time Cop. And that one, I think on record, what did that one make domestically? Really only like 55 million or something like that. So it's not like he was shattering records by any means. I don't want to mitigate or anything like that, but
No,
it's kind of unfortunate.
it's a really fantastic point because I think there's a few things with that. Like, I mean, you think of like we were just talking about The Rock. I think The Rock was like the number 3 or 4 movie for its year, and it made like 400 million in the box office. And so it's like, So Time Cop had said it made 100 million on a budget of 27 million. So for Universal at that time, seeing something like that for them, that's huge, right? Because that's anything it's making 4 times its budget. I think we look at these sort of these budgets and making your money nowadays. It's all framed in these like big budget, like Marvel blockbusters, where it's like, if you spend 250 million to make a movie, if it doesn't make a billion, right, it doesn't, it's not, they lose money out of it. Whereas I think, like, at that time with Van Damme, even if his movie, like if they spent 25 million to make the movie and it pulled in 50 million, that would be a win for the studio, because they didn't probably spend as much money marketing and all that other stuff. And so he was a moneymaker. And then, like, to your point too about the home video market at that time, that burgeoning market, and the cable market as well, it was like all of these outlets were looking for content. And so that you could make more money on the back end. Now it's like, if a Van Damme movie comes out, and I don't even know how you quantify success for it, right? Like, like Darkness of Man on Hulu or something like that. Like, how do you even quantify success? Like, does
No.
Hulu say if it streams enough, we'll keep it? I don't know.
Yeah, I really have no idea either. You know what I mean? I've long wondered, with these films premiering nowadays on these streaming platforms, how do they even deem what is a success?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because all the money is generated via subscribers. You know what I mean? And so they, for all we know, the average Netflix subscriber could be subscribing to watch reruns of Seinfeld.
Right.
You know what I mean? So how do we determine that a film like The Old Guard or whatever is a success? It's wild. But I mean, I don't know. If we look at this particular film, I'll admit, when I first watched it, I was a little disappointed, because at the time it was, not what I was expecting from Jean-Claude. He doesn't do his signature helicopter kick. He doesn't do the splits. I mean, it is a slower war period piece. I watched it again, though, in preparation for this. I've actually seen it a couple times in the past couple of years. And you can't help but appreciate it, because, I mean, like I said, it has a lot of scale to it. You know what I mean? I mean, it starts out in France, and he goes off into the, what is it? Into the deserts, across continents. You know what I mean? Fighting these battles and everything. I mean, it's a decently made movie. I can't knock it. And here's full circle for you. But one of the big producers on this one was Edward Pressman, who, no slouch, also produced The Crow as well. So I think for him to come in, I think at the time he saw some value in the project.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point too, because I know there was some issues, right, with like Sheldon Lettich originally was going to be on board, and then he drops out, and so he still gets a producer credit, and he still gets a writing credit, a co-writing credit, but he was supposed to be the director as well, and then I don't know what happened there that caused him to drop out. But again, when a movie usually has that kind of turnover in the production, there's usually an inconsistency or an unevenness about it. And I think, for like you said, for a movie of this scale to come out as well as it did, anyway would have been great. But the fact that it did, despite some of the turnover in the crew, and in the production, I think is a testament as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, I don't know. Is it fair to? I mean, are we good to go into the film now?
And why not? Yeah, I mean,
kind of what we.
Yeah, I'll give a quick synopsis, because I think again, this is like it's a Van Damme movie from the late '90s, so yeah, people probably I think they've seen it. But the idea is Van Damme is a boxer in 1920s Marseille. He gets into, I think it's the Corsican mob. I think because the guy's name is Galgani. I think it's supposed to be Corsican mob. But they want him to take a dive in a fight, and he does the old Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction, right? He, Butch, he doesn't end up killing the guy, but he does knock him out and runs off with the money. But it doesn't work out as well as he plans, and the baddies almost get him, and he has to join the Foreign Legion, and they send the Foreign Legion to Morocco, where they're fighting the Berbers, who are rebelling against the French, and I guess it's a French and Spanish occupation, but yeah, the Foreign Legion are sort of the first line that go in there to try to defeat this guy. And so, yeah, Van Damme's trying to do his time so he can get out and get back to this woman that he was supposed to go to America with. And which, as I'll say, kind of the tail end of this synopsis here, I can't imagine a lot of people from France wanted to go to America in the 1920s when you couldn't drink in America at that time. But that's just me.
I can't. Well, okay, yeah. To that, I will also say I can't imagine too many people that would be willing to enlist in the French Foreign Legion just to escape some mob goons. That is the one thing. If I could do one complaint on this film, it's the narrative impetus to get him into the French Foreign Legion. Yeah. You know what I mean? I've always cried BS on it. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. So this film it's trying to do a lot of things. Okay. I don't want to say the tone is off, but it's trying to be a lot of things that it really should not. I mean, so one thing we should say is actually, this is the second time that Jean-Claude has played a member of the French Foreign Legion. He played, I don't know if you remember Lionheart.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right.
His character in Lionheart was a member of the Legion in modern day who escapes the French Foreign Legion, and then his superiors are travel to America to get him back, right? So in this one, I think what Jean-Claude wanted to do, it's very clear, he wanted to do a period piece that paid tribute to the hard work and the trials that soldiers who joined the French Foreign Legion went through in the 1920s. And I think that right there is a noble idea. I think it's a great idea. It's a fantastic story right there. Because anybody who knows anything about the French Foreign Legion, I mean, they're badasses.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes without saying. I actually remember I saw this. I was a sophomore in high school, and I didn't really think much of history class. But I remember after seeing this, it did get me interested in looking up what the French Foreign Legion is. And it's really fascinating. So my understanding, I don't know if they still adhere to these policies nowadays, but back then, they would take anyone and everyone from whatever country you're a part of or whatever, as long as you can get to France, I think was their big thing. They didn't ask questions about your crimes or anything like that, but they accepted you, and providing that you could go through their rigorous training regimen. I mean, I think it goes without saying, like I said, they were absolute badasses, and their training regimen is known, even to this day, as just being hardcore. I mean, they take the best of the best, and if you can't get through the training, then obviously you don't have what it takes. You know what I mean? And so I think that right there is a cool story. What's unfortunate is I don't understand why they just couldn't have made Jean-Claude some kind of criminal. You know what I mean?
Right, or even framed, right? A framed criminal. Right.
Or maybe he's a framed criminal. Maybe he's a petty thief who's framed for the murder of a shop owner, that he was at the wrong place at the wrong time or something like that. I mean, because they state that they take virtually anyone.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they kind of set that up, and it's unfortunate that they don't go with it. But the whole boxer subplot is just ridiculous. I mean, I think what they're trying to do is they're doing the save the cat moment. They're trying to establish Jean-Claude as a badass. So we need the scene of him in the ring showing that he can handle himself. I mean, that's action movie 101. You need that moment that shows that he can handle himself. Fine, I get that. But the whole, he's supposed to throw a fight, and then he doesn't throw the fight. So then he's on the run from this mobster. And it doesn't, like I said, Matt, it doesn't make any sense why any sensible person would do that. And it's not like you just decide to enlist and then boom, you're on a plane that night, I'm assuming. You know what I mean? So he had to hide out for a couple days more.
Yes. Right. They're shipping people out right away. And again, other than the Foreign Legion part of it, they lift this entire piece of the storyline from Pulp Fiction. That's Butch in Bruce Willis's character, right? He he kills the guy, but he doesn't mean to. But he doesn't throw the fight. He's got to get out of Dodge, and then he's trying to stay away from Marcellus Wallace in the gang, and so it obviously ends very differently in Pulp Fiction than it does here. But they lifted the same idea from it, and to your point, I guess they're trying to split the difference with it being Van Damme, like, oh, we need to have him to be able to, he's able to fight or that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. I think if you grew up on the streets, you'd probably learn some tricks on how to fight as well. But I guess that would be what would get him in shape is to be a boxer. But you're right. I mean, but even as a boxer, right, you still could be framed for something, right? You still could be at the wrong place at the wrong time and accidentally kill somebody. So, yeah, I agree with you there. I think, you find your way out of Marseille eventually, right? I think, I don't know, you just, hide in a laundry truck or something.
Something like that. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, and I almost kind of wonder too, I mean, if maybe he didn't want to go with him being like a street criminal or something, because if you look at the quest, he has that same character where he is he's a street performer, but he's also a petty thief, and he's in charge of these kids, and then he has to run away. The quest, actually, I would argue, is even more of a mess than this movie, to be honest. But yeah, it doesn't. I mean, look, obviously the script needs to get Jean-Claude's character from point A to point B. Point B being into the Legion, but they could have done so many other. They could have tried so many other things, or. I really don't know, but I like the idea of, like I said, like you said, maybe he's someone who's framed, or maybe he is just a surly gangster who doesn't have much remorse. And then wouldn't that have been something too? He's this, surly gangster who kind of plays by his own rules and everything. And then he's able to kind of learn humanity and that violence isn't the way by being in the Legion. I mean, you know what I mean? They could have done some stuff like that, but the whole throwing the dive thing, I like how you said it's a ripoff of Pulp Fiction, because that's exactly what they're doing.
Right. And I mean, it was only 5 years ago, but I mean, it's funny because we always think of Pulp Fiction ruining direct-to-video movies because so many filmmakers were making these like overly talky assassins having ironic conversations, right? And it's just like, just bogging movies down with all of that stuff. But this is a case where, they just, they pulled something directly from there and decided to go with it. But I also, to your point, that was something that I thought about too, is the fact that, like, okay, so he joins the Legion. Yeah, they're not going to be like, okay, you can hide out here while it's time for you to go. They're going to be like, okay, be back here, in 2 days when the ship sails, right? Like that's what.
Yeah, the ship goes out. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then what that? I mean, to give the film credit, I guess we could say, is it's not like they completely ditch that that element, because one of the mobster goons also joins the Legion so that he can track down Jean-Claude's character and get revenge on him. But that right there is just too stupid too, because I'm sorry, you'd think that he would look at his boss and say, "You want me to do what? You want me to you want me to join this army just so I can catch this guy?" Like, I'm sorry, no. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, because it sounds like the mob boss was so well connected that he was able to buy off the Legion so that they could, implant these two guys there and then have them all go out on a mission, right? Because they all go out on that mission where Van Damme's supposed to die, and unfortunately the Berbers threw a wrench in that by attacking them, so they had to, all kind of team up and fight against the Berbers there. Which that's an angle of this movie I also think is interesting, and I don't know how you put it, because the French are the occupying power. Right, it's the Berbers are fighting for their freedom, and so it's hard to put them as the bad guys because they're just trying to repel the invaders. But our heroes, the people we're rooting for, are the ones that are fighting against them, and so it makes for an interesting dynamic as well.
Yeah, no. I mean, I will say about the movie, I mean, I'm not trying to jump all the way to the end, but it does feel, like I said, like the script and the screenplay, the production and just in general is biting off more than they can chew and is trying to do too much, because it almost feels like I'm not assuming that the film was shot in sequential order, obviously from beginning, middle to end, but it's very interesting how the film just ends rather abruptly, where Jean-Claude's Alain character, I should say, how he's the sole surviving member of the Legion, and he's just left there, and the film just ends abruptly, and it almost feels like they completely ran out of money and they had no idea how to end the darn thing.
Yeah.
But it
I think the
really,
trivia
I
went
mean,
over that. I think that was actually covered in the trivia.
okay.
Yeah, what did it say in the trivia? I think it's a spoiler one, so I've got to click the red spoiler button because I guess that would spoil the ending. But so I guess yeah. So okay, so there was another ending where Alain returns home to France with Victor. In the Jula, the other guy was killed in battle, and then Victor betrays Galgani, I guess, and then he's killed. So I can't remember who Victor was, but yeah. So then there's a second draft, I guess, where Alain went to France and he kills Alain kills Galgani, the mob boss guy. And then I guess when they were going to have it go into the Galgani's bar and kill him there, so they're going to do that as well. But instead, they just decided to go with Alain finds out that Katrina made it to the U.S. and they end it. That's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very anticlimactic, lackluster ending, because you'd think that maybe if we're going to put this on the hero's journey template, he would at least, Alain's character would head back home as a changed person, but they're not going to do that either. But yeah, the way it just ends, where he's just alone out in the desert.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we're supposed to realize that he's seeing firsthand the futility of war, but it's not like his character was ever really questioning, the ethics of war at the beginning of the movie either.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? That's an interesting piece of this as well, because other than the Macintosh character, so the Macintosh character was someone who was in the British Army as a major, and then was disgraced by gambling debts, and so he was stripped of his rank and was kicked out. So then he goes, and of course there's a lot of tension between him and the Stephen Burkoff character. So Stephen Burkoff plays the sergeant, who's the drill sergeant, who's like sort of whipping them all into shape, but he's not really good tactically, whereas this Macintosh guy is. And so there's some tension there between the two of them, as Macintosh is like, why aren't we getting the high ground, and all that kind of stuff that would happen. And Burkoff's just like, angry and yelling in a German accent, because I think he's a German character who's in the Legion. But yeah, to your point, it's like that Macintosh character, he, I think it's based on some realities as well, because at that time there were a lot of aristocrats in England who were losing money to gambling, and so it was kind of an issue that was popping up there. Yeah, I remember, where was I? I can't remember where I was going with that. I kind of went off on a tangent about Macintosh there. But to your point about them, he was the only one who's really a soldier, right? The rest of them, like for example, we have Luther, played by Edwali Akinwumi Agbaya. I think I'm saying his name correctly. But he was a African American in America who's wrongly accused of murder, and he comes to the French Foreign League, and he's thinking like he's going to make his way to Africa by fighting with the Legion, and find his way. I mean, technically he was, but so right, he's not interested in fighting. He's interested in traveling or something like that, and most of them are just trying to get away from something. So there isn't, like you said, there isn't sort of like a sense of like war is bad. Like they all think war is bad. They all want to just try to make it out alive.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and the thing I will give this film credit for, I mean, is, like I said, it to that 15-year-old kid that was in me. I mean, at the time, it was it got me interested in the French Foreign Legion. You know what I mean? It introduced me to that, and I looked it up, and I think the film does a pretty good job exploring what the French Foreign Legion, how it operated in the 1920s. I mean, they talk about how this unit takes pretty much everybody, and yeah, I mean, we get an eclectic cast of characters. We get the character of Luther, we get Macintosh, obviously. Guido, I think, is right, one of the other characters' names. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so you have all these different personalities from different cultures coming in to shed light on the Legion and what it did. And I think that was I think that did a really good job. I think it did an amazing job as well, just showing the training. I'd be willing to bet that the training was actually even more difficult than what we saw. But I mean, watching this as a 15-year-old and then watching this again, now, I mean, these guys are really out there in that blaringly hot, brutal sun, you know what I mean, in those hats and in those outfits, really, really running up hills, with those rifles and everything. I mean, this did not look like a fun shoot, but they're trying their damnedest at it. And I think on that end, it does pay off and in my opinion, delivers.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think, it definitely points to, like, I mean, especially how they're kind of mistreated by the sergeants. They're kind of tossed out of bed, and they get hosed down and all that kind of stuff. And it's sort of like this thing where the French almost treated them as like disposable soldiers, right? That will just we'll kind of send them in first to deal with these situations. I mean, the French knew. I mean, in most cases, the Legion were fighting in occupied territories, and so they knew that the people that they would be fighting against were, had the motivation of wanting to repel invaders, and so yeah, so they would send them in there to, kind of be the first line of defense, because that's, I think the average French citizen didn't want to necessarily do that if they were in the military. And I think, to your point, they do a really great job with that. And I think they the piece that I think they could have done a better job, I think, maybe is putting a little more of the nuance of the fact of, like, hey, I think they mentioned a little bit about, hey, these guys are fighting for their homeland, and we're just here, visiting. I think Macintosh brings it up a couple times, but that's a little bit more of that nuance there. I think might have helped it some too.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I think in the end, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but I mean, this feels like a real passion project for Jean-Claude. You know what I mean? I mean, the guy is from Belgium. He speaks French, and if you look at the trivia about this film, and who knows how much truth there is to Wikipedia or anything,
right.
But I mean, this was a project that I think Jean-Claude wanted to tell. You know what I mean? And so, and yeah, unfortunately, he doesn't do the kicks and the splits and everything that he's known for, but he is, branching out and trying, something new. You know what I mean? That's the one thing too that we taught, that maybe we kind of alluded to, that's kind of cool, is, look, it's really unfortunate, but I think the current state of the independent action market is pretty much kaput. I just, there's clearly no more money in it for these type of films anymore. So, we're just really not getting them, unless it's going to go direct to Netflix or something like that. It's just, we don't have them anymore. So that's why, in my opinion, at least, guys like Van Damme, we just don't see them much anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, we also need to face the fact that they are old. Okay, so that right there, but they just, these type of films with this kind of production value behind it, just doesn't exist anymore. And so that is why, we don't see much of Van Damme. Dolph, I think, I hate to say it, as much as I dig Dolph Lundgren, but I mean, he's promoting his vodka now, which I think is probably maybe a more lucrative outlet for him. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. We look at a film like this that was dumped direct to video, and while it did get a sizable rollout, we look at it and think, oh, that's inferior because it didn't go to the theaters. But I think we need to look at it nowadays and realize, man, we didn't know how good we had it back then. Back then, you know what I mean? Because nowadays we just, you wouldn't get something like this that is filmed in Morocco or whatever, you know what I mean, and has multiple sets, multiple locations, and multiple battle sequences, for God's sakes,
Right? Because you talked to the guy who did War Pigs, right? Who he specializes in sort of World War II period pieces. But I think in his case, right, he has access to a lot of that stuff already, right? Like the props and the costumes and everything. And so really it's just sort of finding an outdoor location that can double for a World War II battle set or something.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, and look, I don't want to, speak ill of him or anything, because I mean, he's doing the best he can. But look, he owns his own prop studio, so you almost kind of wonder if maybe there's like some tax write-off situations right there. You know what I mean? If he's making a movie and using his own props,
Yes.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is he has not done a single film since those, because I think even the market has dried up on those type of films too. So I mean, personally, I think World War II. I mean, gosh, I mean, look, it was a huge war, obviously, with tons of stories to tell. But I mean, we're still getting, movies made of it. Maybe not at the rate that we used to, but I mean, look, there were other periods. I think World War I has just as many interesting stories to tell. And obviously, Jean-Claude wanted to tell a story from, his side of the continent where he was on, you know what I mean? To or excuse me, where his lineage is from, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think historical period pieces can still be told, but I guess what I'm trying to say is they don't all have to be World War II. And I feel like that's where many filmmakers seem to want to kind of languish and stay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 'cause, I think because there's probably like easy good guys and bad guys with that one, right? Because it's like I don't think it gets easier than a Nazi, right? Like that's sort of your baddie in a can, as I like to say. Just pop the top and there you go, you're good to go. So I think that's part of it. In this movie. Because that's one of the things about this movie. A chance that this movie takes is the fact that the good guys and bad guys are ambiguous. Do we really think of the Berbers who are defending their home territory and are trying to expel the French colonists? And they were also expelling the Spanish at that time. And I think not long after this situation, the Spanish and French do overwhelm the Berbers and end up, taking over Morocco completely. But, so it's like, do we root for them? Well, we don't want necessarily, we still want to see Van Damme. We've gotten to know these characters as well. Van Damme, Guido, McIntosh, we want to see them survive and make it through this as well. So, when you add that ambiguity, that's also a chance that they're taking with the movie and saying, we want this in there. And it's another piece of it where the modern DTV world, they don't want ambiguity, right? They want to just like, what can we market straight ahead? What can we put on the tin to get people to buy something?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do. It's funny you mentioned marketing this on the 10. I do remember seeing this advertised in that trade magazine at the video store, and just Van Damme's face staring at the camera, wearing the hat and everything. You're kind of thinking, "Oh boy, really? Is this is this really what I want to see?" But I mean, look, it's you can't knock him for wanting to try something a little different. And at least he's not going into a full-on drama or a full-on comedy. He's still, he knows his niche, he knows his bread and butter. And I mean, if you look at, I know this is kind of way off topic, but if you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he did the movie Kindergarten Cop, yes, it is a comedy. It's you could say it's a family comedy, but I mean, the first 15 minutes of that movie are pretty violent. I mean, he's basically playing a variation of the Terminator in the first minutes. And then if you look at the end of the movie, my God, those final 15 minutes of the movie get weirdly, really violent. Taking place in a school, you know what I mean? And so I don't think you'll ever hear a diehard Schwarzenegger fan say, "Oh my God, like Kindergarten Cop is my favorite Schwarzenegger vehicle." However, but by him kind of straddling both those genres, like I said, he was still able to kind of placate both audiences, if that makes sense. And I think that's to an extent what Jean-Claude was trying to do here with this one.
Yeah, and I think it's the one thing that I've come to appreciate about him now, that I think, as we go back to that period in the late 90s and the early 2000s where, and even when I started my site in the late 2000s, like, 2007, 2008, where, some of those movies, I watched them and I was like, I don't really get what's going on there. Like, I think Replicant was one of those ones where I didn't necessarily appreciate it much when I watched it, but then when we watched it for the review, when we for the podcast episode we did on it, and it's like, man, Van Damme's doing a lot of different stuff here. He's playing two different characters. They're very unique in the two different ways that they're playing the characters. One's a serial killer. I mean, yes, they're still martial artists, but it's a role that I think we were talking about that time that nobody else would take that role. Nobody else in this niche, this action star niche would do a role like that. And I think you could probably say the same thing here. I mean, I could see Dolph doing a movie like this, but I don't know if anybody else would do a movie like this.
No, I mean, yeah, I think Schwarzenegger might have, as long as it had a director on board that he trusted. You know what I mean? Schwarzenegger was always, if you look at his films that he did, he was always very, very careful in particular with who he chose to direct his movies. You know what I mean? So you have, Walter Hill and Paul Verhoeven and Ivan Reitman. You know what I mean? Like he really wanted the best of the best. So would Schwarzenegger have signed on for a movie that was directed by Peter McDonald? You know what I mean? Who did this one? Probably not. But I mean, look, if Paul Verhoeven stepped forward, or James Cameron, who, I think Schwarzenegger would star in anything starring James Cameron. I don't know. I think we could have seen something here. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I think I'm trying to think of any particular scenes that stood out to me. Goodness, I don't. I mean, I don't know about you, but do you see what I was saying? Do you agree? I mean, I think it does a really good job of just capturing, because it does spend a good chunk of the film really exploring the training regimen of what these guys went through before they go into battle. You know?
Yeah, because I think it's always a common thing in these movies with like the training and the boot camp or something where it's they kind of either they dial it down or they kind of make light of it or however. And I mean this is like real deal stuff where they're like they're sleeping in their cots and they're getting ripped out of bed by the drill sergeants, but also the fact that they've made up this unit of criminals in a lot of cases, and it's like criminals do things like criminals do. Like there's the big German guy that was like trying to beat up Guido, and Van Damme had to stop him. It's I think that part of it they didn't sugarcoat any of it, right? And I think again, it's one of those things like you watch these prison movies where things happen in a prison, and it's like some guy whatever the main character is ends up in the cell, and the cellmate that he has is like really cool with him, and like they're just meeting all of these different prisoners in the cell and all this stuff, and it's like that's really not what prison is, right? Prison is like it's like a fight for survival on a daily basis, and I think this movie definitely captured that part as well. I think they didn't sugarcoat that, but at the same time, it's like, okay, but now who is this Legion who's been trained up? What are they doing when they're fighting? And it's like, yeah, they're fighting against this well-trained Berber army and holding their own against them.
And I think that's, I mean, you already kind of alluded to it, but I think that is ultimately what hurts the film as well, is that, I mean, look, it's exposing, American audiences to something that maybe they are unfamiliar with, which on that end, I think it succeeds. You know what I mean? It's taken its time showing the training, especially of these rookies and these new recruits. But yeah, like you said, it really doesn't have a sole villain. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't know entirely how to work around that. And so I have to wonder if maybe that's why they threw in the taking the dive boxing element, and then having the mobster goon who then joins the Legion, and he and Van Damme are trying to sort out their I don't know what you want to say it that obviously they are enemies, but in the end that kind of gets thrown away, because in the end they find common ground. Yeah. Right? Him and what is that character's name? I think it's
Julot.
Yeah, I was going to say Julian. Yeah, but Juliet. Yeah. They basically put aside their differences and find common ground. He, of course, has to die. Juliet dies, so that makes it easy. But I mean, in the end, he's really not even a bad guy. You know what I mean? So it's very difficult, because it struggles with where to go. And if they had gone with our idea of maybe Jean-Claude's character was a criminal, and that's why he went into the Legion, I don't know who they could have made a villain, you know what I mean? But I think on the other hand too, what you have to appreciate about it too, is that there really aren't the clear black and white villains.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I like what you said, how the Berber army, they're also defending their land. You know what I mean? And I think that works as well. I can't believe I'm bringing this up, and I know people are going to throw rocks at me for saying this, especially you, Matt, so I do apologize.
Okay. Right.
But Pearl Harbor, if you looked at the Michael Bay movie Pearl Harbor, say what you will about it, the romance subplot is ridiculous, fine. But the one thing I will always remember about Pearl Harbor that I do to this day actually really appreciate is how it didn't paint the Japanese soldiers as being villainous either. It also, if you remember that film, it portrayed them as also, they're soldiers for their country. You know what I mean? Who, they're going into battle for their reasons as well. And so it doesn't, that film is interesting. That's a period war piece as well. And that one's really interesting because it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have those black and white villains either. You know what I mean? These are all just young men who are going in and representing their nation's cause. Make of that what you will. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, because I think it's one of those things that, like we were talking about, like if you're packaging a DTV movie nowadays, it's like, well, we need clear-cut heroes and villains, and it's like, okay, well, do World War II because you get Nazis and that'll be easy enough. But the other thing I think that like you said, this need to create a villain in the movie and create tension, it caused a problem with this more nuanced approach, because when they the two bad the fighter and the other guy from Galgani's band, when they go to kill Van Damme, and they're all going out on a patrol together, and Van Damme realizes when he gets there that, oh, they're all here to kill me on this patrol, instead of Van Damme having to get out of it, it's so because you want the hero to have to solve a situation, instead the Berbers attack, and they all have to sort of fall back and go back to the fort, and there's obviously there's tension there because it's like, hey, you just tried to kill me, but now we're having to fight the Berbers together. It's probably a more realistic scenario, right? Like if the Berbers aren't going to wait for Van Damme and company to sort out their issues before they attack first. But what it meant was that the hero didn't have to solve anything; it was solved for him. And so that's another area of the movie where I think, from a writing standpoint, that the nuance may have hurt it in some elements.
Yeah, no, 100%. And maybe that's perhaps one of the reasons too why the film is not highly regarded among especially Jean-Claude Van Damme fans and completists. You know what I mean? Because even his lesser efforts, at least still, I mean, if you look at a film like Death Warrant is not in my top 10. However, it does have an amazing villain that I still remember to this day. You know what I mean? And so same thing with Maximum Risk. Maximum Risk is not one of my favorites, but I mean, my God, Maximum Risk has a couple villains that, steal the show. And I think, what is it Hitchcock used to say? Your film is only as good as your villain.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So that does kind of hurt it. But I think in the end, I mean, it's funny. Before we started talking, I was looking at a random list that was made on IMDb of Jean-Claude's top 25 movies. And these lists are always arbitrary because I always look at them and I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. I mean, but this dude puts Legionnaire at number 14.
Yeah.
So, of course, he also puts Cyborg at number 2,
right.
Which I don't know if I definitely don't agree with that. But I mean, I'll take Legionnaire any day over the stuff he's done in recent years, because Legionnaire at least has a hefty budget behind it. And you look at stuff like Kill 'Em All and We Die Young, and I'm trying to think what else he did. Darkness of Man.
Yeah, The Bouncer.
There's The Bouncer. I memean, there's really not much there.
Well, yeah, I guess the Bouncer probably is a little bit better, I guess. But I know what you mean. Yeah,
yeah.
Because we were talking about Darkness of Man, and we were saying we were trying to give him credit for trying to do something, a little outside the box, or try to do something a little bit different. But I think Legionnaire succeeds in doing something a little bit different. I think it's, and that's, I think there's probably some lessons maybe that a Darkness of Man can learn from Legionnaire. Legionnaire was a little bit shorter. It was a little bit slimmed down, but it kept the nuance as well. I think the one difference we'd say between Legionnaire and Darkness of Man, Legionnaire's catering budget was probably like what Darkness of Man's entire budget was. So
100%. Yeah, the cost of how do I say this? The Darkness of Man's entire budget probably cost what a crew member's flight ticket round trip cost to get get to Morocco or wherever it was they filmed this,
Yeah, or the advertising budget you were talking about for Legionnaire, right? They put more advertising in the whole budget. And it to your point about these direct-to-video movies nowadays, and I always go back, I know every time you're on, even when I have other people, I always go back to the interview you did with Ben Sachs on I Must Break This podcast, because I always remember that line that he said where he would talk about the distributors would come to him and say, how much do you think you can make this movie for? And he'd say, well, $5 million. They say, okay, make it for $3 million. And it's like, they're always trying to trim on the margins and all that kind of thing. And it felt like back then, in the 90s into the 2000s, especially with this kind of this sweet spot for direct to video of like the late 90s, early 2000s, where the big names were getting into it, both, actor talent wise, but also the distributors and studios. And so they were putting a little bit more money behind things. and they weren't afraid to go all out with the practical effects and go all out with the with the explosions of. And granted, computer effects weren't what they've become, but there wasn't this sense of like, oh, can we do this whole thing in one location? It was like, no, if we're gonna do the Seagal movie in Thailand and in Tokyo, let's do it in both places. Let's spend the money to shoot on both locations. Can you imagine a direct-to-video movie now that would shoot in Bangkok and Tokyo, right? It's like they feel like, no, we're going to Bulgaria and we're going to make it both look like both cities.
Not even Bulgaria. I mean, they're just going to dress an alley in Los Angeles
Right.
in a warehouse, in this about a block away.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that's kind of the sad state, and that's why I honestly think that we're gonna. I don't want to say that we're not going to be seeing them entirely anymore, but the number of these type of films have slowed way down, to the point where it's kind of, what's the point anymore? So you can't blame, many of these stars for stepping away. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, man. I mean, look, Van Damme got in at the right time. I mean, he really did. He got in at the right time to capitalize on these. And I mean, look, if you just look at his films that he had done subsequently, okay, all of the direct-to-video films that he'd done, I think they're all fun. I mean, look, I'm not a huge fan of Second in Command. I think Second in Command, he kind of slipped up a bit at that one.
I agree with you there.
But I mean, if you look at post this one, he had trying to think, he had Replicant, which we talked about obviously already. Replicant has a lot going for it. The Order. The Order is a really goofball. Oddly enough, that one's directed by Sheldon Lettich as well, who wrote this one. But yeah, The Order is just a goofy, weird, it's kind of slapstick comedy. He did. I'm just running down the list.
There's Inferno, aka Desert Heat, which is kind of bonkers itself.
That one's bizarre. The Hardcore, which is kind of like he's teamed with some rappers, and then Until Death. Until Death, where he plays a drug-addicted detective.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, and so we wouldn't have seen him take those kind of chances back in his Universal days. So, yeah, I actually really, really enjoyed. And then that's when we also got to see him return as Luke Devereaux in those Universal Soldier sequels, which was pretty cool. So, look, he had a great he's had a great run in the direct-to-video world, that still was seen by quite a few fans.
Yeah, I mean, like, to your point about the video store in those days, I mean, they, you would see every new Van Damme and every new Seagal movie. They would be in any, Blockbuster, of course, at that time. They had, like you said, they have walls of these. But any video store that that you'd go into, they would all be there, and they would all be on TV. They'd all be on cable. They'd all be on either pay cable or like you were talking about the USA Network. Spike comes around. The Nashville Network becomes Spike, which is kind of a funny thing because later on, all these cable channels that don't show anything that resembles their name, like Bravo didn't change their name to the Real Housewives channel. They just keep calling themselves Bravo, even though they don't show anything that's like theatrical or indie or anything like that anymore. At least the Nashville Network's like, okay, if we're not doing anything country anymore, let's call ourselves Spike, and we'll do it that way. But I used to see a lot of these movies on there as well. To your point about this movie, I didn't realize this, but I remember it being advertised on USA. I'm trying to think if I actually saw it. I think I may have seen it on USA when I first saw it, as opposed to renting it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, and boy, wouldn't that be cool if channels like USA did content like this anymore? But now we're lucky if we just get Law and Order and Friends reruns on all these channels. You know what I mean? I was talking about that with a buddy last week. Isn't it amazing how original programming on cable networks has become a thing of the past?
Yes.
Isn't that insane? Like, if you think about it, like, cable networks used to have their, obviously you'll always have HBO, they'll have their stuff. But I mean, channels like, and I'm talking scripted stuff. The reality stuff is easy to produce, but channels like A&E and TNT and TBS and USA all had their own original scripted television shows. And all these, I mean, it's funny because obviously if the direct-to-video action market is dying, you can only imagine what's happening to TV channels as well, and clearly they are as well. I mean, they're just the wasteland for syndicated television shows anymore.
Yeah, well, because NBC, I mean, or Comcast, I guess, or whatever, they are essentially spinning off their cable channels into like this sort of like island that they're, or this like barge or something that are just going to drift out to sea. That's why, like, the NBC News has been pulled apart from MSNBC and CNBC. Like they're, that's sort of their goal, I think. And yeah, to your point about USA, it's like if they're not showing Premier League, soccer matches, football matches on weekend mornings during the EPL season, all they're showing is either Law and Order reruns or Fast and Furious movies, or like you said, Friends reruns or things like that. MTV, it's like, it's just ridiculousness all night long. And, there was a time when these channels would show things that like you're saying. And I mean, USA, I mean, Monk, Psych, those were shows that lasted for a long time. I don't know what kind of numbers they would have had to pull to be successful, but they were there. I mean, I don't know how many seasons of Monk there were, but that show was on for a long time, and that was an original scripted program on USA. That was, their content that they were making. Comcast would never, I don't think they would, maybe was Suits maybe the last show that was on USA? I think,
yeah,
Comcast. I mean, can you imagine if you went to Comcast and said, hey, I want to put a show on USA, they'd be like, sorry, no, we're, if you want to put it on NBC, maybe we'll have it on NBC for later. Otherwise, maybe we'll stream it directly to Peacock. Maybe that's what we'll do.
Yeah, and it has to deliver numbers on Peacock. Otherwise, we're gonna cut the cord.
Yeah. Right.
I know there was talk. I think what was it? I read that the producer of Legionnaire, going back to Legionnaire real quick, did have the idea of making this a television show, which I think that would have worked. You know what I mean? If you look at all of Van Damme's movies, I think this one would certainly work. How many seasons it would have lasted, that's debatable. But I think there are stories that could be told. You know what I mean? From this particular film. But in the end, I think it's a valiant effort on Jean-Claude's behalf. I mean, this was a passion project a story that he wanted to tell, and I think for the most part, it worked. And, we haven't said, but Peter McDonald, who directed this, it's really interesting. But Rambo 3, he had about 10 years prior, which took place in Afghanistan. So, I mean, I have to believe that they saw his work on Rambo 3 and what he did and decided, you know what, this guy has shot a pretty epic looking film in a desert before, with horseback and whatnot. We need a similar aesthetic. And I got to believe that's why they brought in Peter McDonald to direct this film too.
Yeah, and in 1999, it would have still been enough for him to say, even if it's a direct-to-video movie, it's a Van Damme movie. You could still, at that time, you could get big-name directors. It wasn't like, what comes later, with the, like a Keone Waxman, or some sort of a professional director who can you get in here and just bang this thing out. Think of like a Fred Olen Ray, who's like doing Christmas with David Dakota. Back then you had names. I mean, Inferno was directed by the guy who did Karate Kid.
John G. Avildsen. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too that we got to say about these films is they didn't bring in slouches. I mean, Ringo Lam, for God's sakes, Ringo Lam did 2 direct-to-video Jean-Claude films, and I think a lot of that was at Jean-Claude's behest because he knew, look, this guy is an accomplished, amazing director in Hong Kong who can make me look good and really get me to emote. I want him called in to do these films. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, no, you're 100% right. Nowadays, these films, they're mercenary jobs. I've used that term on my podcast a couple times, but I mean, I don't think there's a heck of a lot of quality control. You know what I mean? It's a matter. It's more or less, look, we need this product delivered in 2 weeks. Under these parameters. I mean, Dolph, he did a movie of Luke Wilson a couple years ago called The Best Man.
Oh, yes.
That film was shot in less than 10 days. Yeah. An entire movie was shot. And you know what? In the end, when you look at it, you can tell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is for going direct to video. I read the shooting days on this one. I think they were in the desert shooting this for well over a month, man.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like
yeah, they were on location in the, again, yeah, the Best Man, it was like, oh, we've got access to a casino. Beautiful.
Yeah, we got access to a casino. We should say we got access to a casino
Right.
that, for whatever reason, is allowing a wedding party to have hold of the entire casino
Right.
for an entire weekend. Like, what casino in Las Vegas is going to allow that?
Right.
Oh yeah, you guys get the entire casino to yourselves. I don't think so.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just insipid. Like,
Right. And I got the sense, because with Best Man, I got the sense that like Luke Wilson was he was sleepwalking through that movie, right? He could care less. But it was almost like with Dolph, where he was like, what can I make about my character? So like he made his character an alcoholic, and it's almost like he wanted to try out his drunk acting, or his acting as character's drunk. It's almost like kind of like what with a lot of these direct to video movies, where a lot of actors are like, what can I add to my show reel? Oh, I'm a UK actor, but maybe I can show off my American accent. It was like Dolph was like trying to find his little bit out of that he could enjoy. But it seems like with Dolph, unfortunately, it's like if he's not directing the movie, there is, like you said, there's a dip in quality control there.
yeah, no, 100%, 100%. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I would go back to these days wholeheartedly. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to have a film on the level of a Legionnaire again. You know what I mean? Or an Until Death again. You know what I mean? I mean, when these films came out, we looked at them as being, oh, it's direct to video. So, you know what I mean? So you kind of graded it already on a curve to where it's already graded at about a C. You know what I mean? But like I said, we didn't know then how good we had it, and so now you look at these films and it's like, no, I think that's more a B plus.
Yes.
if we're going to compare it to some of the direct today, I still will say the stuff that Lundgren was doing around 98 to about 2000, 2001, that's still D- material all around. But you can't look at a film like Agent Red or The Last Patrol and think, oh, that has something going for it. No, it does not. So
I mean, Agent Red lifts the entire opening from Stormcatcher. It's like, when a movie's doing that, when it's lifting an entire scene from another movie, yeah, there's not much you can do there, But I want to say to your point about these movies. One of the things that's kind of cool about them is that, yes, they're on Tubi, right? They're on streaming sites like Tubi, Fossum, all those ones, so they're readily available. But the other thing is, because the market at that time was so robust, it's easy to go into like a used video store, like a place that sells used media or anything like that. You're going to find these movies on DVD or VHS much more easily than you'll find newer movies that may have a very limited DVD run, if they were released on DVD at all. So that's the other piece that I kind of like about these movies, that they're available now for people to check out as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, look, I've been saying it for years, but I feel like finally now Tubi is starting to get recognized as being a legitimate service. You know what I mean? It used to be Netflix and Prime were kind of the only ones that people watch movies, but now I think, look, Tubi actually has some good stuff, and pretty much what would you say, 90% of Van Damme's catalog is on Tubi. So look, I would gladly go to Tubi any day over Netflix. So, because at least, look, with a lot of Netflix's original films, very rarely will I leave content and happy after I just watched it. But at least with Tubi, it's kind of like, sleeping on that old pillow or getting that old blanket. You at least know, going to Tubi, you're going to find something that you've seen before that is worth your time. And thankfully, most of Jean-Claude's efforts are there. So
yeah, I totally agree. Well, yeah, but one quick thing I want to say as we're about to wrap up, though, about Dolph on Tubi. He has over 30 movies on Tubi, and so I've contemplated doing a Dolph month, where I just watch a Dolph movie a day on Tubi to see if I can get through it. I don't know if I'd make it. I mean, again, like you said, a lot of these late 90s, early 2000s ones are on there. Like Agent Red is definitely on there, but it's kind of a funny concept that you could do a month of Dolph on Tubi and not do any repeats, that they have that many movies on there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And people who are listening to this who have not perused Tubi, I mean, well, I remember when Tubi first started, I mean, there was a lot of garbage on there, a lot of horror garbage too. And there probably still is. But I mean, you look at the interface now and it's like actual recognizable, like, good titles, And a lot of people seem to forget the early days of Netflix as well. But the early days of Netflix, boy, oh boy, that had a lot of junk too.
Yes, it did.
So
Yeah, which I kind of miss some of the junk, but on the other hand, you're right. It was an interesting interface at that time when it was first starting out, where sometimes the streams would be interrupted, or finding a good internet, or all of those things. It was a kind of an interesting thing to think about, and think about too that was at this stage now, what, like 15 years ago. Like, it wasn't 15, 16 years ago when that was really starting out. How quickly, once it started, how quickly it kind of took over. Now it does feel like there's a little bit of a return back to the physical media piece, but it is nice to go back to these ones like a Legionnaire, and just sort of think about what 1999 was for this time period.
Yeah, no. Hey, look, I mean, look, I had fun coming back to it, because I feel like Van Damme is in a state where he's still. How do I say this without sounding like a weirdo? But I mean, he still looks good. He still has those kind of young looks about him and everything. I mean, he's still relatively in his prime, maybe slowly with one foot out the door of it. You know what I mean? But I mean, he still looks really, really cool. I mean, and it's a cool movie. I mean, is it one of my favorites? One of his? No, absolutely not. But I mean, look, the bar slid much, much lower in the years to come, especially the older he got. So I think this is one that's good that's good to check out. And too, we should say, is there was a period, I remember just actually a few years ago, where this was hard to come by on streaming. Like, I remember when I got a hankering to watch it again, it was not available for streaming anywhere. So I had to bust out my old DVD and dust that off and watch that. Now, thankfully, it's on just about every free streaming service around, thankfully. But I guess that just kind of is a testament to physical media, because while it is available on Tubi and all those right now, who knows if it will be forever. So yeah, I say check it out.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say, I think I would take the Pepsi challenge with Van Damme's DTV stuff from this period versus Seagal, Dolph, anybody else. I think that there's some real inspired stuff here, and I think, to your point, this movie is definitely one of those.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Well, Sean, as we're wrapping up here, anything that you wanted to plug?
No, thank you. I guess if anyone has not heard them, but my remaining episodes of I Must Break This podcast are still available. You'd have to dig for a bit, but on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network feed, that's there. If anybody is curious on what Jean-Claude Van Damme's latest film is, he does have a French comedy that came out that is available now in the States called The Gardener. And I did check that out about a week ago, and it's weird. I will say. I don't know if Jean-Claude doing comedy really, really works, but what's interesting about his comedy roles is he's always poking fun at himself and his image whenever he does comedy. And so, look, he's found a niche for himself where he likes starring in these dopey French comedies, and perhaps in France the humor lands much better than it does here in the States. But I don't know. I think it's. I mean, look, for Van Damme completists, I think it should be seen. Just if anyone's curious what he's still doing these days.
Yeah, I need to check that one out. I haven't checked that one out. I did check out the other one. Was it Last Mercenary? Was that the?
Oh God, yes, that and that's one of the big reasons why it is better than Last Mercenary, I will say. But it's not amazing or anything. But I think a lot of it too, to be perfectly honest, is I just don't know if French comedy lands 100% here with American audiences like it does over there. But yeah. It's available.
Yeah, exactly. No, you make a great point. That's and to that point, I think it's kind of fun that he's doing them. But yeah, for people watching, and I think Last Mercenary was long too. I think it was the other problem with that one. It was a very robust movie. But thank you again for coming on, Sean. This is a lot of fun. I think, again, revisiting these movies has been a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the invite, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.